Hello everyone. As some of you may know, the British have decided to leave the European Union. That movement called BREXIT, which means British exit, has won in the referendum. I think they won by something like 52% saying go and then 48% saying remain. So they didn't win by a large landslide, at all, but they did win, and it's a clear win. So what does that mean? That means that the British people do not want to be part of the European Union. And moreover, the British people that don't want to be part of the European Union, many of the votes for go, for leave, came from working class communities within the British, within the United Kingdom. So, but let's ask ourselves, first of all, what is the European Union and why is it that the British wanted to leave it? The European Union started out as an economic consortium. It's supposed to be a trading bloc to help European countries start trading with one another. You can understand the reasons why, World War I, World War II, that all these fights, especially the British and the English, destroyed themselves, bombed each other, their cities into rubble. And so the idea was to get the Europeans, the British, English, the French, and the Germans around a circle to start talking. And the idea was to make Europe safer. And we're going to make Europe safer by starting an economic consortium. People can trade better. And that was a good idea. There's nothing wrong with that. But then it started to develop further as we get into the 80s. More organizations were developed. Then there was this idea that, well, maybe the Europeans should have a common currency. And then the idea came about that maybe there should be a European Court of Human Rights. And then there was a development of courts that oversaw, or attempted to oversee, the laws that were happening in their respective countries. And this is when people started to say, whoa, especially British people started to say, look, we need to back off here. So UKIP, the United Kingdom Independence Party, was actually began over 20 years ago. Their leader, Nigel Farage, was a man that's been campaigning for 20 years or so to get the UK to leave. Part of his arguments, and the arguments of increasing numbers of, they're called Eurosceptic, people who don't think that the European project is heading in the right direction, the Eurozone project heading in the right direction. The argument of these people, and the argument of Nigel Farage, has been that, look, number one, it's bad economically. You've got all of these countries that have different cultures, different views, indeed different ways of operating, and definitely different strengths to their economies. So for instance, Germany is a very strong economy. Greece is not a very strong economy. And so the argument was that, look, we're going to run into trouble. You can't have a single interest rate for all of these countries because their economies are different strengths. It's like having a fast person being tied to a slow person and then trying to win the race. That's just not going to happen. The fastest person is going to resent the slower person. The slower person is going to resent the faster person, and then you're going to end up having animosity. So people like Nigel Farage say, look, what ought to be in Europe? Europe should be separate states, working together. They ought to be friends, but there should be no overseeing of laws. There should be no regulation of, or attempted regulation of economies, and certainly there should not be an attempt to tell other countries what to do in their politics. So for instance, the Irish, when they had to be bailed out, the Irish were told, look, by the European Union, that look, this is a bad time for you to have an election. You should not have an election because you need to get your financial house in order. This was outrageous. People like Nigel Farage thought that, look, you cannot go into a sovereign country and tell them what to do, when to have elections. Otherwise, you're really doing away with their sovereignty. And a lot of what those people are saying is starting to kind of come true. What Nigel Farage has said is starting to come true. Indeed, the European Union has started to realize that the only way that we can really have a strong Eurozone project or European Union is not just by having an economic consortium, a trading bloc, where we get rid of tariffs, which are fees for trading with other nations. It's saying that that's not the only thing that we need in order to have a strong European Union. Indeed, what we need is a parliament that will then establish standards for products coming in and so forth to various countries. But it doesn't stop there. Then the proposals come up that we need to even have a European army. This is problematic because there's already NATO. So the idea that we should have a European army, what's that army going to do? People have thought. A single European army controlled from Brussels, which is the capital of the European Union, where they have their parliament. So a lot of skeptics were like, this is strange. This is starting to sound as if people are trying to make a United States of Europe. And moreover, weaker economies have had to, or stronger economies have had to take much of their wealth and transfer it to weaker economies to weaker countries within the European Union to help them with things such as infrastructure. Meanwhile, this was the time of 2008 to 2012, this Great Depression that's hit us, and a lot of countries are understandably, a lot of stronger countries are understandably very frustrated, saying we're having difficulty ourselves and we have to take our resources and we have to send them over to others. And then the migrant crisis came with the Syrian war. So now the European Union, the Parliament, decides, well, we should just, anybody who wants to come into the European Union, let them come in, and any of the member states have to agree with that. This is why there were those problems in Hungary, and this is a major reason why the British were against this. The British were saying, look, when we were not part of the EU, we had maybe 30,000 people coming into our country every year from 1950s onward, right, let's say. But now, you're asking us to take over 500,000 people every year. Our economy is not big enough, our country is not, it's not big enough for this, like economically we can't handle all of these people. And also there are concerns too from others within England and other European countries saying, look, we're losing our culture. Our values are being eroded away. We're not even sure what it means to be British anymore. Some people have been more almost militant about this in the way they argue than others. So, for instance, the Front National in France, led by Marine Le Pen, seems to be much more right wing than, say, UKIP, the United Kingdom Independence Party, led by Nigel Farage in Great Britain. So the Front National is saying things that, look, culture is important, identity is important, and the European Union cannot ask people to get rid of their identity. So a lot of people are saying, look, if I want to be Polish, I ought to be Polish. I should not have to throw away my identity, my culture, my way of life to be part of the European Union. I have sovereignty, and the European Union should not be able to come into my country and tell me what to do. That's just to get rid of sovereignty. So much, and the strength of the argument, I think, a lot of people try to use like economic arguments and so forth, but really what their argument is boils down to this. It boils down to, I do not want the sovereignty of my country being destroyed. I want the nation state. So if I'm Polish, the country Poland is established by the nation, which is called the Polish people. So Poland is the land of the Poles, of the Polish people. Great Britain is the land of the British people. And Great Britain is an interesting case, and we'll talk about that after this. Because Great Britain is not just England. Some people say, well, I'm going to England, and they mean Great Britain. But that's actually not the case. Great Britain itself is composed of 4 countries. So the Republic of Ireland, let's say that's separate. That's not part of Great Britain. But then you've got Northern Ireland, which is a country in its own right, with something called a devolved parliament, where some of the powers of the United Kingdom Parliament are sort of given to the to the devolved parliament, to the parliament of the Northern Irish, or the Irish, for instance, right? So the Irish will have like a different criminal code. They'll have rights to determine education, various things like that. So it's really a confederalist system. It's not even so much federalist, because these are still countries in their own right. They're not states of the United Kingdom. So Ireland is the first country. Then you've got Wales. Then you've got Scotland. And then you've got England. So there are 4 countries that compose it. So that's, but we're going to talk about that in a bit. So the argument that comes from a lot of these people, and these numbers, these parties that are against the European Union, they're growing. Not just in not just in Britain. The British have, of course, argued that we should have our own, we should just leave and become our own nation state, and then when we want to trade with the European Union, we'll still trade. We trade like £70 billion per year. We're the European Union's greatest trading partner, and we will remain so. But we want to be a separate country that determines the number of people we let in. And we don't want our culture sort of flooded out. This worry has been more forcefully raised by Marie Le Pen in France. And now there's talk of her party suggesting that, the Front National, is suggesting that we need to have a Brexit, so a French exit from the European Union. So if that happens, then it seems like a lot of other countries may start saying, well, I want to leave, we want to leave the European Union too. So, which becomes problematic, because then you won't get this idea of a strong European nation state, as it were, as many people have argued, which is actually, as many people have argued, is happening. Because you cannot have monetary and regulatory union without also having political union. It leaves you in economic trouble. But if you have a political union, then that's just the United States of Europe. And when you try to have the United States of Europe, it doesn't work out. The Europeans have tried it before. You might argue that they haven't, but look, what the Europeans tried to do, what Hitler tried to do, what Kaiser Wilhelm tried to do, what Napoleon tried to do, was to unite Europe and have them be one state. But when you try to unite Europe and have them be one state, what happens? There was war, there was bloodshed, because people don't want to give up their identities. It's in the nature of human beings that if I'm a Pole, or if I'm a Swede, or if I'm English, or if I'm French, I want to remain French. I want my country to be ruled by French people. I want to practice my language. I want to do what I want to do. I want my nation to determine its own future. I want a nation state. So the issue is really, at bottom, about the nation state. When the Europeans decided, look, everybody has to have their own nation, then peace came about. But now there's this resurgence of this idea that we need to have, somehow, we need to have one Europe as a state in itself. This is what all of these people are arguing against. So, when we go to the United Kingdom is an interesting case in itself. The United Kingdom, as I said before, is composed of England. And the English are a separate nation of people. They speak a language called English. But they're a separate nation of people. They inhabit the same island, the same landmass, as the Scots to the north. The Scots are also a separate nation of people. They have a different language. They really do. A lot of times we think that, oh, they're just white people that live there. They're all English. No, they're not. The English are one nation. The Scots are one nation, are another nation. The Irish are another nation. And the Welsh to the southwest of that country, another nation. And then you have the Isle of Man. And then there's another island, I forget the name of it right now. but also that island is a sort of protectorate of the United Kingdom. So these customs, these countries have their own languages, they have their own nations. They're separate nations in their own right. So when you think, oh, Europe is just like, white people that are there, no, they have different languages, they have different customs, and they want to remain who they are. And that, I think, is the lesson for us. That's the departure point. That's what we can learn there. When we come to South Sudan now, all of us, there's this idea that's been pushed that somehow we're all South Sudanese, South Sudan is one nation. No, it is not. South Sudan is not one nation. It cannot be one nation. It is a state, yes. It is more like this European superstate that these European politicians want to make. And who benefits from that superstate? The common person does not benefit from that superstate. The average English or the average Scot or the average Irish does not benefit from that. Who benefits from it? The wealthy, the super wealthy benefit from it. Because the super wealthy and these multinationals always benefit whenever there are these large organizations because they know one another. If you're well connected, then you benefit a lot. You really do. If you're not well connected, you will not benefit. If you're a fisherman, you won't benefit as much. If you're an average person, you will not benefit as much. So we see the same thing happening now in South Sudan. South Sudan is like this project that these elites are trying to make. But who benefits from it? The average person, the average Nuer person. What have you gotten as the average Nuer person since 2005? What did you get? All the resources from your country, from your land, from Nuer land, which, by the way, I might add, is bigger than many of the countries, than probably all the countries that compose the UK. Not all of them together, but bigger than the land of the Scots, bigger than the land of the Northern Irish for sure, bigger than the land of the Welsh. It's maybe even bigger than England, because it's a huge chunk of South Sudan, and South Sudan is the size of France, and France is much bigger than England. Right? So, but what have you gotten? The oil has been taken out of your land, and what did you, the average person, get? You got death, you got rape, you got murder, you got poverty, and you got shame. You, the average person, you got shame. The political elite got the benefit. If somebody's a Nuer political elite, then he has the wealth. These people are already millionaires. Number one, you have to realize this. They do not care about you as much as you think. They don't. But, in any event, let's leave them for now. Who are the other parties that benefit in South Sudan? The people that benefit in South Sudan are the people who took things by force. And by force doesn't mean by strength, it means by lying, by cheating. The people that are benefiting in South Sudan now, as a whole, even their average people as much are not their average people are not benefiting as much, but the people that are benefiting from South Sudan are the Dinka. They are the ones that are benefiting from South Sudan. Because once they got in, they fooled everybody, they fooled all these people with this idea that, oh, we're one country, etc. But then where are the resources coming from? They're coming from Nuer land. And then when those resources are taken, what are they doing? 70% of the students that are sent out, at least 70% I'd say, that are sent out to go to Harvard or Yale or Oxford or any of these places are Dinkas. And so they're going to go to these places and they're going to come back with their degrees. And then once they come back with their degrees, what are they going to be? They're going to be the politicians, they're going to be the landowners, they're going to be the millionaires, they're going to be the airplane industrialists, they're going to be the head in the army, they're going to be all this stuff. And then what do you, Nuer, get? You get nothing. Nothing. Zero. You get nothing. Then you get turned into a second-class group, even though all the resources are coming from your land. And that's a Nuer. We're not even talking about the other groups. The other groups that are smaller, they get nothing. They get absolutely nothing. Many of them indeed are being destroyed. That's what's happening. This is not helping you at all. So, and then among the Dinka, who benefits most? The political elite, the ones with the money, the ones who then can start connecting up with all these multinationals that are coming in. For instance, 20% of South Sudan is sold. So 20% of your land is sold to foreign countries. That means other people who are not even African are going to come in and they own land in South Sudan. So your grandfather's land may be owned by an Indian or a Malaysian or an American, and there's nothing you can do about it. They're going to pull oil out, they're going to pull resources out, and eventually they're going to pull mineral wealth out. They're going to farm your land, and they're going to get all the money, and then you're going to buy from them something that is from your own land. They're going to be rich, you're going to be poor in your own country. How does that feel? No Malaysian fought for you, no Chinese sacrificed his life to get South Sudan to free Nuer land. None of that. But they're going to get the benefit of it. Why? Because the Dinka elites have sold it, and now they feel that they can come and kill you to reduce your numbers so that you don't talk as much. And the Nuer political elite, what do? The ones that are with us, they say, well, look, this is wrong, etc., etc. But they have their money. Everybody's just looking for themselves. You need real leaders. Then the other ones, some of them have even sold themselves to the Dinka, and they're getting whatever they want from, well, not even whatever they want, they're just getting whatever they want so they can stay quiet. So they don't care about you. So they'll stay quiet as you get killed, they'll stay quiet as your resources are stolen. So what needs to be done? Nobody wants to say it, but the Nuer eventually are going to have to say, we want our own system. They're eventually going to have to say, we want our own country. If they don't say we want our own country, or we want an arrangement such as is in the United Kingdom where we can get to control our own resources and determine education, what language we speak in our country, all of this stuff. If you don't decide to do that, you will remain second class. And there will be many classes in South Sudan. There will be like 64 different classes. Because we're talking about the Nuer, but what about all these other smaller groups that don't have as much political power? Nothing. They're going to be absolutely destroyed. Some of them will actually lose their culture, even lose a sense of who they are. Because they're small. So, what the Nuer need to do is they need to start saying, we want our own country. And then once you get your own country, realize that you're already divided amongst yourselves. And that division is not necessarily bad. The fact that they're Jikwahing, the fact that they're low, the fact that they're Ga Yu, Ga Ya, Ga Wer, all of that, that's not a bad thing. Those right there are your states. Those are your own separate states. And among the Nuer political system, every group of people, every tribe had its own, was economically sufficient for itself. It was independent, rather. So all of these groups of people were independent. So you already had a federal system amongst yourselves. You were a federation of tribes. And then as a whole, you were called Nuer. And then whenever there were issues, you actually had something that was like a parliament. You would get in and you would discuss matters that affected all the Nuer tribes. That's what you need to go back to. That way, your people can come in and the resources of your people go to your individual people. The resources low go to low, and then whatever transfer payments need to be made to other groups of people, to other Nuer, okay, it can be made. But those are going to be relatively small in comparison to the benefits that each people get from themselves. And then we will be a nation of people. That's a nation. That's a nation state. The Nuer need a nation state. You cannot run away from that. The Nuer need a nation state. South Sudan is a dead project. South Sudan should be a bunch of countries working together. It should be like a region like Europe. It should not be one single country. Whenever that happens, you have to force people to forget who they are. You have to tell people they have to forget their language, they have to forget their customs, you have to forget their way of life. But that's not what it should be doing. It should be encouraging their ways of life. How do you encourage the way of life of people other than to give that people the right to determine their ways of life? When there are smaller groups of people, they can become protectorates of other countries. Like the Isle of Man, the island of Man is a protectorate of the United Kingdom. That's what needs to be done. And we keep running away from this. But we should not run away from it. Just think about the fact that the Europeans decided to make for themselves nation states. And that's when their peace came about. And whenever any attempt to try and put them into one superstate arises, people like the British say, and they start resisting it. But then with us, we're told that we have to come together into one nation state. And then when there's crime and death and destruction, then they'll tell us, well, you know, you people you're tribalists and so forth. Well, what were they doing? Why did they divide themselves into nation states? Because they knew human nature says, I want to be who I am. I want my resources to come to me and to my children. I want to be ruled by somebody like me. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is a good thing. So what we need to do as Nuer people is we need to get back to the way things were before. That's perfectly fine. Economically, we will do wonderfully. Our population is 4 to 5 million. I believe that. And the region that we inhabit is large, very large. The region that we inhabit could sustain more than 60 million people. So we have a long way to go. Imagine the Nuer population, 60 million, and the average person having a good amount of wealth, making at least 50, supposedly the average income in Nuer land was like 30,000 American dollars. The average income. You realize the stability that would make? Of course, there would be billionaires and so forth, but the stability would be great. We would be stable, we would practice our language, our customs, we could breed ourselves, and our numbers would grow. People are going to resist this. I know some people are not going to like this idea. They're going to say, y'all, you're dividing South Sudan, etc. We're stronger together and all of this stuff. Really? Death, destruction, war, poverty, shame, walking about naked, running from country to country because you have no place of your own. Is that good? Living as refugees? Refugees. Is that what you want? Then some of you might say, well, y'all, we have problems among ourselves. Like, for instance, the Lo, and the Gayug, they fought, and etc. That's why I say that every group of people is going to form its own state. It's a state within a united Nuer state. So it would be the United States of Nuer land or something, or the Nuer Federation. So it would be a real federal system. In other words, it's just like the way we used to be before. Except now, we'll invest in infrastructure. If fisheries was a problem, if waterways were the problem, we'll build a canal between Gayug and Lo Nuer. Then the reason for fighting will be gone. This is what we need to do. And you keep running away from it. Stop living on the sidelines of history. For once, not for once, let's go back to the way that we were. Stop living on the sidelines of history. You don't belong there, you belong in the center of it. Let's start determining our future. This is a discussion that needs to be had. I believe firmly in this. The Nuer people are a people. We speak the same language. We have the same customs. We have the same history. Even our genealogies end in the same way. We are a family on the earth, and we deserve to live together. And we deserve to have our own state. This is the reality. Now people say, well, y'all, what will make sure that the Nuer state doesn't break up? Well, I believe in the nation state. As soon as the Nuer are a nation, they cannot break up. Sure, somebody might say, well, we'll break up, but there will be no principled reason for breaking up. Why? You're a nation. You speak the same language. And amongst you have different tribes. Every tribe has the same area. Why would you break up? Why would you disconnect like that? Unless it's a colony of Nuer elsewhere, forms another country. Why would you break up? And besides, each group of people is like sort of independent, and we just look for the Nuer interests, our language, our customs to go forward, then whatever way. So even if we did break up, it would still be okay. All I care about is the future of the Nuer people and them living and going forward into the 21st century, 22nd, 3rd century, and as long as this earth should last. And in order to do that, we need the common person to have wealth, we need the common person to be secure, we need the common person to be okay. No, some people might not like this, but this is where we are headed. South Sudan is only benefiting the Dinka. And among the Dinka, it's only benefiting the wealthiest. And among the Nuer, it's only benefiting these career politicians. It's not benefiting the average person. And it will not benefit you until you start to take power into your own hands. Thank you.